this is the park bench panel. It's a format that I've done a number of times in person back when we could do that. And what it basically consists of is you have sort of a starting set of panelists, and then you start a conversation with the audience. And as people ask questions and share opinions, you kick off some of the panelists and you bring on new panelists. And so this is a really exciting way to almost like get a feel for the larger community's thinking. And that's what I'm hoping to do this time. But as I've warned everyone here and a lot of people out there, this is an experiment and it's the first time I try to do it online. So it might be real clunky or it might be awesome. And I hope it goes great. But as a starting point, I'm actually going to run at least the first few minutes of this as a kind of more traditional panel. I have a few questions and comments and ideas. And I think this starting set of participants is really interesting because we have Will, Matt, and John, each kind of working in like slightly different parts of the roll-up space and with potentially differing ideas about what should or should not be, you know, the path forward in that respect. So since none of you have already given talks, if you can do a really quick intro to who you are and what project you're from, that might help the audience understand who you are. I think you're all muted right now.
Roulette for who goes first. Okay, so I'm Will. I'm the founder of Diversify. We are, I'd say, an app-specific scaling solution on Ethereum. We're using the StarkX Validium. We're the first operator of that, and we enable trading and transfers very low cost on layer 2. We use Stark proofs, but actually the data for Diversify, controversially, is like held off chain in a Validium style setup, which has a lot of benefits in terms of much lower cost and privacy. But I know many people think also has some like unacceptable scaling security trade-offs. But actually, we think that for a lot of applications, including lots of types of DeFi, that's actually a sort of major improvement over using a pure rollup. That's my quick intro.
That's your 2 cents. All right, John, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
First of all, I'd like to point out that it's very funny that you said controversially about off-chain data. But anyways, I'm John. I do protocol research at Fuel Labs. We're building an optimistic rollup on top of Ethereum, which is primarily focused on bringing a new execution environment to Ethereum instead of replicating the EVM inside a rollup. We're essentially building a much more optimized environment for both simple transfers and in the future smart contracts.
Matt?
Thanks, Anna. So I'm Matthew from Loopring. I do business stuff over there. We, as similar to Will and Diversify, we are an application-specific zk rollup, but in our case, yes, zk rollup, not Validium, for the trade-offs that we'll probably explore here. Another difference being that we use like ourselves as the rollup provider. Loopring is the zk rollup, not using Starkware or another provider. So we're kind of at the lower end of the stack and operating the products as well. Sorry for the barking going on here. And yeah, so we allow kind of low cost, apparently instant trading and transfers on without ever sacrificing Ethereum level security. That's what we're going for.
Okay, a question to all of you, and I think this won't be too controversial, but it is, what is an L2 solution and what is not an L2 solution? I don't know if, John, you want to weigh in on that. What would you define an L2 solution as?
I guess since you targeted me, I have to go first. But I'm going to use the definition that Giorgio's kind of popularized, namely, how do we separate an L2 from a separate L1 with like a bridge, where sidechains would be a separate L1. And specifically what we want out of an L2 is we want it to be trust minimized. So users can always remove their funds from the L2. And in the case of like a smart contract style L2, they can always send transactions. Because you can imagine like if you have a loan, like a maker loan or something on this L2, because it does smart contract support, you can't just like withdraw your loan. You have to be able to process transactions in the L2, right? So it's not just withdrawing, but essentially what you want to be able to do, you want to be able to always move your funds, and you want your funds to not be able to be stolen. And if you have those two guarantees, then you can say their funds are as secure on L2 as they are on L1. Sidechains don't give you this. Rollups do give you this. And the general term that I've been using to encompass kind of what is the minimum set of trust assumptions you need is this expression trust minimized, where I would describe the minimum set of trust assumptions as we trust the L1 is censorship resistant. And that's basically the only thing you have to trust. If you have to trust more than that, then I wouldn't call that trust minimized, and then I wouldn't call that an L2. So an example of something that isn't trust minimized would be just a plain sidechain, because whoever controls the sidechain consensus can just steal your money. So L2 isn't necessarily, in my opinion at least, just relegated to sidechain style stuff, or rather sidechains with additional properties like rollups. It could also be channels. I mean, channels are also L2. As long as L1 is censorship resistant, you can always get in your channel disputes and then you can be guaranteed your funds will never be stolen. That's my opinion.
Does validium and volition, those type of paradigms, also fit in the L2 definition? Will, you're welcome to answer if you want to.
Let's let Will.
Yeah. So I think my definition of L2 would specifically focus on the exit conditions around the L2, and that ultimately funds held in an L2 are relying on only the security parameters of Ethereum in order to sort of guarantee that they can exit funds. But I think all layer 2s do give up some sort of censorship resistance or trust at the moment, at least, or trust assumptions, in that even if you're using a full rollup, if you're using optimistic rollup, zk rollup, at the moment operators have the ability to censor. We just heard about sequences, and I think that's a very important sort of piece of work. But there are sort of various, at least during operation, sort of security assumptions that you have to make. But what they all have in common, including Validium and Volition, is that if operator goes offline, or if there's some other sort of set of conditions that's broken, you can exit your funds using only the security of Ethereum, and that's the ultimate thing you can fall back onto. And that's sort of where my definition maybe is slightly different. And so in that case, I'd say that Validium certainly is an L2.
We're already starting to get a few questions from the audience. And so sort of define for the audience members what I'm looking for. Basically, if you ask a straight up question, I will just ask it to the panelists that are here. But if you ask a question that is loaded with an opinion or a straight up opinion, I will then invite you to come up onto the stage, just so you know. That's sort of what my criteria is right now. For example, this I think is actually a question. Mark just asked, it sounds like you consider an L2 with governance not a real L2. Could you elaborate? Or is that an opinion? No, I think that's a question. I think that's fair. Matt, did you have something to add? Or
I agree with John's opinion, but I see where Will's coming from too with the Validium and Volition. I don't want to put off Mark's question, but a point that John said, which in my it's like I say, you could always rely on layer 1 security to eject, to withdraw your funds. The most fundamental security is like to be able to get your money out of somewhere. But John makes a good point. Like if you have a loan on Maker, you need to be able to send transactions. Is that little additional criteria only for EVM capable zk rollups, like Loopring, which has a single relayer? You could always eject and your funds are safe, but our relayer need not process your transaction. It's not censorship resistant. If the rollup is not EVM compatible, does the criteria drop, or must you always be able to force all types of transactions that the rollup supports? I don't know. I'm sure John gets it. I don't know if that's a bit convoluted, but I'm curious if your criteria is stricter than, I think you see what I'm saying. Must any type of transaction be able to be forced through?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I think so.
Sure. we can get back to Mark's question because I feel bad for Mark, but we'll get back to it shortly. Because I mean, this is related. This is related. But
okay.
This goes back to some. I think we had some minor conversations on this on Twitter between me and Matt. But essentially, the kind of adversarial scenario I'm thinking is if you, for instance, have very high throughput rollup. You can call it a zk rollup, right? It's doing 1,000 transactions per second. It has millions of users. The problem is that if it's permissioned, then one person, the operator, whoever you want to call it that, can just stop the rollup and now force everyone to withdraw. Now, sure, it's not like a mass exit scenario where everyone has to rush to withdraw by some time, but still, just the very fact that you now have this huge volume of users that have to each make an L1 transaction to withdraw is like, that's super expensive, right? It's something that one person can make one small action and force a bunch of other people to now make an expensive action. I would still call that L2 though. I would say the minimum requirement for L2 is trust minimization, and permissionlessness is like something that's really nice to have if you want your L2 to be a replacement for L1. But I would still call something that's just trust minimized, even if it's permissioned, an L2. Like a Plasma, for instance. Plasma is permissioned, but I would still call that L2.
Let's continue then with Mark's question now, which is does it need to have governance?
Okay,
do you consider an L2 with governance not a real L2 is actually the question there.
Yeah, so, oh no, well, I see Alex also asking a question. So to Mark's question, I think there's also brought up some stuff we discussed briefly on Twitter, but it's basically, this relates to on-chain governance. So say you have some DAO that can control upgrades to a contract. The reason I wouldn't call that a real L2 is, it's no longer trust minimized by what I call trust minimized. Namely, the only assumption you're making is that L1 is censorship resistant. That's the only assumption you make. And potentially, I would also say a trusted setup for like a zk circuit. I would also put that under trust minimized. But if you have like an on-chain governance, now user funds can be stolen by a majority vote, by potentially maybe like 1/10 of the token holders even, because lots of people just don't vote because they're lazy. And I would call that a much stronger trust assumption. And in fact, I would say that's the same trust assumption as if you just have a sidechain. Right? If you have a proof of stake sidechain, that's the same threat model as that. Like a majority of the consensus of the sidechain can just upgrade and take users' money. Mark says, is it a weird mountain man fantasy? In practice, maybe it is. But this is more like us being pedantic here, as opposed to what do practical users want?
Okay, I'm gonna ask one of Ryan's questions here. What do you think of Alex's predictions on fee growth? That's a question.
Sorry, what was the predictions? Did I miss it in an earlier?
It was Alex. Yeah, it was Alex from MatterLab's talk.
So if you go to 2,000 gigaway, I think, or no, yeah, and Ether goes to 10,000. And honestly, I think this is a genuine real suggestion in that Ethereum fees will keep growing on layer one. There's no reason why they wouldn't demand if this system is successful, which I think is already continuing to happen. It's only going to go up for layer one security. And at the moment, we're wasting layer one security on all sorts of other transactions, contracts, which don't make sense to pay so much money for. But that's going to keep happening because this is a global computer that many people want to put transactions into. And so I think it's completely realistic that will eventually happen. And so most end users will want to interact via L2s.
I agree. Very feasible. Like we saw 1,000 Gwei a couple weeks ago, and look at the space. It's like tiny. We all know each other. We're using it for certain applications. Sure, it's whales getting transactions through, but imagine when this is just completely normalized on layer twos, and you have these layer twos, these like institutions competing for that block space. I see it going very high. And I mean, ETH price, I guess, is a different sort of prediction. I'm also as bullish as Alex, apparently, but yeah, I think that's very feasible. So users will necessarily live on these layer twos.
Do you think, this is kind of a question, Mark said, holding a global lock to the internet financial systems could be expensive. So that I'm going to define potentially as an opinion. Straight up, point made opinion. So I'm going to do the thing that I kind of promised to do, which is switch off someone from this panel and bring on Mark. And Matt, I hope it's okay for you, since I had sort of poached you last minute. Can I switch you out?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thanks so much for being on the panel.
You're very
and
welcome.
Mark, just jump on if you can. So we'll give him a minute.
There's like a Hunger Games thing where once you're out, then you're done.
Yeah. No, you can always come back on, but you have to, here's the whole thing. Questions will be read to the panelists, opinions, like really clear opinions. And Mark, your first question actually had a bit of an opinion in it. So I was like, oh, should we already switch it out? But now you made a very clear opinion. So now you are on the panel. But yeah, there are some other questions that have just been put out here. So the first one that Ryan had said was about Alex's fee predictions, but this I think goes mostly in the direction of Validium. But if fees do grow this much, will Validium get much stronger or grow faster in practice due to the fee savings? Kind of like, is Validium and that model actually the most efficient? I'm kind of looking at you, Will, but it's up to anyone.
You're looking at Mark on my screen. So yeah, so, I definitely, I think the cost is, like, at the moment, the main, a huge advantage for Validium, and that's becoming more and more so, even, since Diversify launched, which was around 8 months ago. Gas fees have just gone through the roof, and the cost difference is huge. And for end users, it's huge in the sense that it's completely feasible that, in another 6 months, even interacting with, like, pure zk rollup ends up being too expensive for a lot of people to interact with DeFi. And I think more people will take that design choice, but also the solutions for off-chain data availability will improve. So it won't be as simple as just having, like what Diversify does now, which is have a committee of 7 who all hold that data, and therefore you have, like, a certain amount of guarantees which are better than just having a centralized data availability. But there will be other ways of publishing that data, ensuring that there are economic incentives around releasing it and around handling all of the edge cases. But I don't think that's in my view, the ultimate end ideal case would be that everyone has pure cryptographic security via only a pure zk rollup. But I think that's becoming already sort of infeasible with current cost, and therefore there'll be sort of better and better solutions around data availability.
Sky asked, this is for John, this is actually just a question as well, is Lazy Ledger used as a supplementary layer for any sort of rollups today?
Sure, I can briefly answer that. So this also ties into a question Mark asked, which is, well, the trade-off without governance is no upgrades. So can we actually do better than having no upgrades or having upgrades with governance? And this is where Lazy Ledger ties in and rollups. So Lazy Ledger is a blockchain designed for and optimized from the ground up for being a scalable data availability layer. So you can think of it kind of like ETH2 with all its sharded data availability chains, and then you have some separate execution system. For example, in the case of Ethereum, you have the ETH1 EVM chain that processes transactions, and then you have a separate chain for data availability. So Lazy Ledger can be used instead of ETH2 for such purposes, and we have been in talks with various teams that are building rollups for this. Lazy Ledger is not live yet, so nothing live yet. But how did this relate to upgradability? So the Ethereum world computer model is basically you have these immutable smart contracts that live in a single virtual machine. And you can't really upgrade these without on-chain governance or without like admin keys. The Cosmos model is like this internet of blockchain system where each chain is sovereign. So each chain can be upgraded via hard forks. And this is one of the amazing properties of blockchains in general, is that you can do forks, soft and hard. So if there's a dispute between two parties for whatever reason, or two groups of people, you can just fork the chain, right? Which is something you can't do in the traditional world, right? If you have a problem with your country, you can't duplicate your country and all its government and all its money and all its assets and let the best one win. right? You have to come to an agreement. Everyone has to come to agreement to a compromise. With blockchains, you can just fork. If you don't like Bitcoin, you just fork it into Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, right? If maybe you don't like the direction Ethereum goes with refunding people from the DAO hack, you just fork it into Ethereum and Ethereum Classic and let the best one win. So the Cosmos system is the system of sovereign chains. And the only difference in the sovereign chain and this world computer model is these applications can upgrade themselves through forks and let the best one win. But the downside is they don't have shared security. When you have all your applications in a single virtual machine, they have shared security because you can be guaranteed that one application like Uniswap and one application like Maker, they can be guaranteed that both of them, to corrupt any of them, you need to corrupt the single Ethereum chain. But it turns out you don't actually need them on the same virtual machine. You really only need them on the same data availability layer. That's what we've learned in recent years. And it turns out that Lazy Ledger is a blockchain optimized for this purpose. You can have a bunch of applications on their own sovereign chains, like in the Cosmos system, have them all post their data availability to a single shared security data availability layer at Lazy Ledger, and then you get the best of both worlds. You get upgradability through sovereignness, so you don't end up with this no upgradable world computer model, and you get shared security, which is what you get out of Ethereum. So this model, I think, is the future of blockchains.
But
does that kind of answer a few of the general questions?
I think the question here was, is it being used currently for any sort of roll-ups today? That was the question, right?
I guess I kind of deviated into explaining why that question, or the background behind why that question is relevant to Mark's earlier question. But to specifically answer that specific question, the answer is it's not used today because Lazy Ledger is not live. It's in development.
Okay, got it. That was kind of the next one, is Lazy Ledger live? Yeah, so Mex Cool said that's one of the key selling points of Cosmos. Know that all apps need the same level of security. So that, I don't know, Mex Cool, are you up for coming on the screen and joining this panel? It's not quite a question. If so, hit the blue button up there and you can join. Oh, actually, I think I have to knock somebody off. Oh, yes. Okay, so
I can go since I've talked quite a bit.
I had an opinion there. It says lazy.
Oh, yes, that's true. That's true. Okay. So I'll kick you off, John. Stay in the chat. I hope to see you chatting, and I'll be around. I'll let Mex join. So this is what we're learning about the platform, about how the the timing goes with the switch. Okay. And actually, you're right, Will, that I think Alex's question here, I think this is a little bit leading as well. So Will, so Mex, you've added, great. And Will, I might boot you as well. Is that okay? You're muted, but I'm going to assume so. Okay, cool. So Alex, you join as well.
Hello.
So Alex asked, how does it enable forks? This is actually a question about Lazy Ledger, but maybe you can help answer this, Mark. Lazy Ledger models could only be used as L1s.
Yeah, I think John would probably be the expert to answer this one.
Yeah, maybe you're right. This is a very interesting. We'll see if this is working with the questions. Let me try to find another question up here, because I have some.
Brendan's question. Well.
Do you view the end state for rollups, especially optimistic rollups, as a single rollup instance to rule them all? Or is many rollups capped to being small enough that users can easily verify every transaction that occur on the rollup? Oh, okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, if there's just one rollup, it's like a trade-off space, right? If there's one rollup, then you get composability with everything within that rollup, but you don't get a ton of like scalability, and you don't get like the ability to like opt into like a particular rollup. If there's many rollups, then you can choose to opt into like validating like the particular ones. So it's a little bit more scalable with like many rollups, but then you lose out on the like composability until we have like good kind of cross rollup primitives, which may or may not be a thing. Alex, what do you think?
Well, I think if you apply the philosophy of inequality to rollups, then you might also want to balance them out and give everyone equal chance to serve users. So like we should all try to see like what rollups are underserved and like to move things around.
A lot of gas will be used, like arbing between rollups. One question that I've been kind of like thinking about a lot lately is like, what is like an unacceptable amount of gas to be used for arbing, or is like any amount of gas, like let's say that like 80% of the gas budget is used for arbing. Like, is that too much, or is that just like the market is using 80% of the gas budget for arbs between rollups? Like, that's just something that I'm trying to figure out, if there's like an upper bound for that we should target like as a community. You know what I mean?
You mean like arbitrage between rollups where you like people are gonna trade and balance out the prices? Yeah, well, to honest answer, I think that we will actually like see the world more gravitating towards a few big rollups, because unfortunately inequality is inherent in this world, and the Pareto principle and the power law are like ubiquitous. And this will eventually lead to a situation where you will have a lot more transactions happening inside those few ecosystems, which will be on top. And I'm not sure how things will work between the rollups. I'm actually fairly skeptical that we will have good mechanisms of unidirectional. So like if the trade saldo is biased towards one direction, then the state channels won't work or payment channels won't work, and you will eventually have to go through layer 1. And this will obviously follow the same route as layer 2 to layer 1. So it will depend on what kind of rollup you use. I think it's going to be complicated. So I think this will be something that happens rarely, and more frequently people will just stay in their ecosystems.
There's an opinion there from Jordy who said multiple rollups are important for evolution, like multiple blockchains. And Jordy's actually just about to join us as well. So I just added Jordy there.
Hi, Jordy.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I was just going to say that this comes to my mind when people says that, okay, Bitcoin will rule it all and you don't have any option to other blockchains to exist. So we wouldn't have Ethereum if we are thinking that way. So I think that for the good of evolution, and specifically at the beginning, we are still bringing a lot of research and a lot of work that's coming, and we don't really know what's the best solution. We are competing here some way with optimistic rollup and zk rollup. We don't even know what's the right what will happen and how they will work. We don't know even if it's possible to interoperate between them. We don't know the space. So it's important, I think, at least in the beginning, to have an ecosystem. I think the interesting thing is this interoperability between rollups, if we are able to in some way to work. And this is the cool thing here is at the end is Ethereum, because at the end Ethereum on the bottom is what in some way can join all these rollups and can facilitate a lot the interoperability. But having many rollups will allow space for a lot of innovation, a lot of testing, a lot of learning. And I think it's important at the current stage. Maybe 10 years from now, who knows? But I think it's cool. It's good now to have many rollups.
I fully agree. And actually, I really like your talk about mass migrations, or massive migrations, as you call them. And I really think that they are crucial to any rollup. Like jumping back to the definition of John, I think that like being able to fork away from a rollup to a different rollup or to a different layer 2 solution is actually what makes it a permissionless, like true decentralized layer 2. And it should be like important property of every solution.
There's a question/comment here from Brendan. Do you think that L2s will be antagonistic to L1 or to value accruing to ETH in the long run? MEV in L2 is captured by rollup operators, not miners or validators, and network effects around specific rollups might allow rollup operators to capture value even leave an L1 entirely, taking users with them. And Brendan, I'm going to invite you to come up if you're up for it.
No. We need all the that's working in L2, even if you are an operator in L2, if you are a user in L2, if you are a developer that's doing something on L2, you need to understand that you're running on top of L1. So it's crucial for the space to have a very good L1 and to support L1 and to L1 to evolve. And it's important that L1 continue evolution and give and think. So it's interesting to see, for example, one of the last papers of Vitalik just saying that that Ethereum is going to be like the rollup focus or rollup centric, and this is important to understand because layer 2 needs layer 1. So having a layer 1 that thinks in layer 2, and there is this symbiosis between the two layers, it's important for the growth of the ecosystem.
And
Brendan,
also,
feel free to weigh in against that or with it. Sorry, and Alex, say something.
I just wanted to mention that I believe that MEV long term will not be the problem with as we see it now. So like MEV is not forever and will not always be here because we have actually primitives that can fight it, specifically with zero knowledge proofs and with VDFs and time-locked encryption. I believe that very soon we will see the systems materialize and completely change the entire discussion there around this. So users will, like, the pricing will become a lot more transparent and fair.
Yeah, I was just wondering in the context of like EIP 1559, it seems like there might be sort of this tension because MEV is seen as like compensating miners for lost revenue due to decreased fees or to burned fees. And it seems like in a world in which MEV is instead captured by operators that like that scenario might not play out. And some of the value that might be going to providing security on the main chain might instead be going to providing security on L2. And yeah, I'm just curious, like what the moats will be long term, whether if you have a roll up that has sort of like a lot of user activity that stays and sort of exists in the roll up, whether it might make sense for the roll up operator to provide data availability in some way that doesn't require Ethereum long term.
Well, this is what my talk was about, like that.
Oh, sorry.
You will have to share some, like you will have to split data availability and maybe implement your own sharding in some ways. And you will always be probably less secure than the layer 1 in this regard, but you can allow your users to have flexibility and choose how you balance that. And I think that the security of layer 1 will always be determined by the market. So I honestly, I don't see how EAP 1559 makes like any fundamental difference. Like the miners will just like look at the amount of money they get from the tips and from the block rewards, and they will adjust the hash rate accordingly, or the hash rate will balance out. So like you probably want to avoid any rapid changes, like any sudden step functions there. Like it would be better maybe to make some smooth transition, but eventually it's going to be the same thing. Like just some part of the fees is going to be burned, which is good for Ethereum supply.
Yeah. I mean that. Oh, sorry. Oh, that might be the case. I was just sort of noting that the argument for EIP 1559 is that MEV will sort of like fill lost revenue for miners, and like clearly in if more activity is moving on to L2, that won't be the case. But yeah.
I want to ask, there's a question here for everyone on the panel. The internet started 1969. What year do panelists think we are at right now as related to L1 and L2 technology development?
The beginning of the 90s, maybe end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. People if we see from the number of users that are actually using L2 solutions, well, we have some early adopters. It's not zero, but it's not mass adoptions for sure, even in the Ethereum space. So most of the people in the community of Ethereum is not using a layer 2 solution right now.
That's a good way to think about it. That's interesting.
Question here, and this is someone who's just curious, I think. Can you use L1 wallets on all L2s? I think the answer is
this will depend on the L1 on the support of L1 wallets. I'm sure all the wallets will support the main rollups in L2 very soon.
There was a question here for Alex, which was, how is transaction ordering handled with zkSync?
Well, right now we have instant confirmation. So the operator, the sequencer, provides confirmation of the transaction immediately to the user. And with the introduction of multi-validator consensus, it will be the role of the validators. But we want to keep the block sizes very small. And so the validators will just be able to reorder within the blocks, and eventually we want to get rid of it entirely with introduction of time lock encryption.
In the case of Hermez, we are launching with multi-validator from day zero. So it works like a normal blockchain, So validators are free to choose what transactions occur, and we expect they include the most profitable transactions, the one that get better rewards from the operator.
So do you use some consensus mechanism?
Yeah, we use a it's a kind of proof of donation. It's a proof of work. The idea is that you are bidding, so you can buy a slot, and anybody can buy a slot, and it's a bidding, so it's an auction. So anybody can bid, and the winner can forge as many batches in that slot as they can.
But where is the bidding taking place?
In layer 1.
What do you mean in layer 1? Oh, you buy
smart contract. Yeah, you buy it. So you can buy like.
So you have. I see. So, but wait a second. I don't understand. So, what happens if one of the validators is always going to buy all the slots? Can that happen?
Yeah, well, it's actually it could happen when it's fully decentralized. So it's when all available, but would be very costly. It's like buying an Ethereum. It's like buying an Ethereum. So as a miner, just buying all the blocks and mining empty.
Oh, so you're playing the lottery there.
Yeah. But here is what we are doing is especially for the bootstrap. What we are going to do is just half of the slots will be decentralized, and the other half of the slots will be from the boot coordinator. So it's like anybody can bid, anybody can forge. So we can keep the censorship resistant. And the worst thing that can happen is that somebody just buy one slot and they don't force anything, but then the boot coordinator will do it. But we expect that to remove. We want to remove all the governance in there, and we expect that when there is enough volume in the system, this can be fully decentralized, because it's like it's not worth it.
How do you know that they skip their turn? What's the timeout? Because on layer 1, you can you need to give them some time.
You have 40 blocks per slot.
And do you have to wait for the previous blocks to complete before you can produce your one?
You can. So it's just you are the owner of 40. You are the owner of 40 slots and 40 blocks. So that during that 40 blocks, you can forge as many batches as you want. And after that 40 blocks, it's the next slot, and if whoever wins that slot is the one that has the right. We have an extra thing is that if nobody forges a slot for a number, I think it's like 20 slots or something like that, then anybody can forge a slot.
So as a user, how do I know to whom to send my transactions?
To all of them. You send to all the, you know who is the winner of the bidding of the next slots, so you send to all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a question here is Ethereum L2 bigger than Bitcoin channels already?
It is L2. So sorry,
Is
repeat the question.
Is Ethereum's L2 bigger than Bitcoin channels like Lightning?
I think just purely by locked value, I think L2 already surpassed Lightning, and we see a lot more adoption, a lot more interest. So like it's clearly on the speed of growth is a lot stronger.
Okay, a question for you from John, and this has been sort of mentioned in Timothy's question, I believe, too. It has to do with like compatibility, this concept that you had said before. So can you give us some more details on how you enable Solidity compatibility? Is it an EVM circuit or a Transpiler or something else?
Yeah, this is a great question. So what we do is we have a generic universal circuit which can prove an execution trace of a program. So this is similar to a TinyRAM model, which is pretty wide known. And we put all the heavy operations out of the circuit and we delegate them to specialized circuits. And this is the trick which allows us to have close to full EVM compatibility, because in EVM, so for a TinyRAM, you need to have all the operations to be of equal cost, right? Because like in the circuit, you have like for those people who are not closely familiar with zero knowledge circuits, they represent a mathematical function. So you can have, they really look like a circuit. You have some inputs, then you do some computations, and then you have some outputs, and they are fixed. So you cannot do anything dynamic. You cannot do loops of variable size. You cannot do recursion. So how do you represent a program which can take various paths through the execution? So the way you can do this is just to have steps. On each step, you will prove that you checked all the instructions against the current instruction from the memory, from the program counter, and you actually executed all of them, and then you just pick the one which corresponds to the instruction. So you pick the result, like if it's an addition, you pick the result of the addition and put it to the register. If it's subtraction, you pick the result of the second part of the circuit and put it there. And you have some overhead there, right? So like if you have 30 instructions, then you have to do 30 times more work than every single one of them. But in EVM, you have some instructions that are like hundreds, thousands times more expensive than some others. Like if you compare storage, for example, to a store to addition, you can't really put them in this rigid circuit. So what you have to do instead is to find some way how you can balance. And we do it with recursion. So we have specialized circuits which are optimized for these operations, such as ketchup hash or ECDSA signature verification or storage access or some other precompiles. And then we use as many of them as necessary for this particular block, and we connect them on top of external circuits. And we can aggregate variable number of blocks which are necessary for each of the application. So not sure how understandable that was, but that's roughly how it works with zkVM, and it looks really well. So we are making a lot of progress, and the estimates are really good. So the costs will remain negligible, because we also made quite some progress on optimizing this specialized circuits for hashes. So for example, I think SHA-256 went down from 25,000 gates in R1CS to 5,000 gates in Plonk with specialized Plonk gates, and so on. So yeah, this is kind of the answer.
a question here. For the L2s, which are using proving systems which require a trusted set, if you deploy and there's a bug and it's found, I guess, in a few years' time, what problem could this cause in the worst case scenario? And I think both of you are the perfect people to answer this, actually.
What kind of
What do you
problem?
fear? What do you fear the most, kind of?
The problem is not, so if you have a problem, for example, in the circuit, don't matter if you have a trusted setup or not, you have a problem anyway. And you need to, well, it's like a smart contract. If you can fix it, you do it. If you cannot, it's like a smart contract. You are gone. In Hermez, we are taking an approach of we start with some compromise, with something that's a little bit centralized, and the idea is to turn it off as we go. It's like a balance between security and decentralization, and there are some balance there. It's like we are still like non-custodial, okay, but we can have some kind of skip hatches and things like that. That the idea is to turn them off as soon. Upgradability of the smart contracts is the other thing. It's like we want to create a system where that's not upgradable, that's decentralized, that's governance-less. But at the beginning, this is hard. So we need to take some compromises to launch. I think, Alex, you are more or less following this approach too, because your circuits are upgradable as far as I know.
Yeah, so I would add that indeed, if you have a problem in the circuit, that's equivalent to the problem in a smart contract. So, and we have a lot of examples in Ethereum where contracts were faulty and people lost money or frozen money. So this is exactly the same thing. The contracts are just extension of the circuits are extension of the contracts.
We have been running 3 different audits in smart contracts and circuits, and we have a bug bounty there. We are trying to keep the same parameters, the same security parameters for circuits that as for smart contracts. It's harder because it's like a more newer technology in there, so it's harder to find people to fully understand, to review, but we have been working a lot in this security. And even that, you'd never have you never have the full warranty that everything is going to go right. Maybe there is some bug and things can happen, but this is a space we need to pass, and yeah, it's like it would be easy not to do anything, but if you want to launch, if you want to push, if you want to move forward in this technology, you want to take some risk. We are trying to minimize that risk. We're trying to do good risk analysis. We are trying to do as best as we can, but the risk is going to be there always. And yeah, this is the risk, and this is something that any user, I would say, in any blockchain, in the space, but especially in these new technologies, is something that we need to be aware that we are playing with last very fancy cryptography, very fancy, very new code, very new ideas, and this is something we need to take in account, and we need to think about, and we need to be very aware of that.
I would just add that relying on audits is probably not sufficient. Or at least we need to step up the game with audits and make sure that people understand what is actually being audited, what assumptions are there, and what has at least this code been deployed to the contracts that the auditors check. So yeah.
Yeah, it's like, and even for example, audits. It's I would tell you something. We have been hiring up. We have to spend a lot of money with audits, and they check it.
Oh,
I can't hear Jordi.
Yeah, I can't hear Jordi. Jordi, I don't know why we just lost your audio. Oh no. Can he hear us? I think maybe his headphones might have died.
Jordi, maybe we should. Yeah, we can hear you.
We can't hear you. You'll charge? I'm going to actually ask Will. Will had a question here. And also, I do want to invite, there's a bit of room on the on here. So if somebody wants to bounce up onto the chat, actually, if you have something to say, just like if you have something to say and you want to answer some questions, just add yourself here.
So while they're joining, I'm just going to say that, like, yeah, I'm skeptical of audits as the final source of truth. They're helpful for the teams to actually find bugs and make fixes, but they are not a certificate of quality. Like, you actually have to wait quite some time with a lot of money locked to make sure that these systems are working as necessary.
So I was about to ask Will's question, but I actually want to ask Lasse's before because it's directed at you, and since you're on here and we can hear you, could the, and actually relates to Jordy's project too, could the EVM be transpiled to another rollup? Example, could you have Hermez inside zkVM?
Well, you can. Let me think quickly. You can. So like the very expensive operations, like whatever is expensive in EVM. Let me think about this. This is actually yes. So it's actually not going to be that expensive because we are only talking about arithmetic operations. So yeah, sure, why not? Absolutely.
Jordy, are you back? Oh, you're muted right now.
Now you're muted.
Yeah. Hopefully we can hear you when you unmute. Oh, maybe your microphone isn't picking it up. It should be in the screen, the mute button, but I can't unmute you. And Marcel just said, Jordy, you went out just as you were talking about cost of audits. Audit's the interesting part. Your headset died. So there's basically two things. One is finishing your thought on audits if we can, and then maybe following up on what Alex is saying about this. No, we still can't hear you. Do you want to reload? Yeah. No, we still can't. Oh, yeah, there. Yeah, John's given you some tips in the chat there. Kev, I mean, we need some new people to join, though. Now it's just me and Alex, fireside, which is awesome. But okay, Jordy's joining again. But if there's anyone else who has a question or wants to jump in, please do so.
Hello, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
Sorry,
okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay, do you want to finish your thought on the audits? And then think about this idea of combining your two projects.
Yes, I heard what Alex says before, and it's like, yes, audits are essential, are important. People have to do audits, but they are not the panacea. They don't give you the full warranty on that. We, for example, it's like hiring audits has been very helpful just even for questions that the auditors just ask, and just one thing comes to the other, and it's just a matter of understanding your code, learning your code, and going to all even with that is hard, but it's the only way. Right now, it's the only way to move forward. At the end, I don't know. This is our policy. Is just try to do the best we can. Just try to do the best, so the best is safe that we can, knowing that there is a risk. Then let's analyze the risk, and if happens something, it's what it is. But we need to put our best effort for this to be safe. Okay.
Now, could you merge Hermez and zk sync?
I'm sure. I'm sure it will. Mainly because. Hermez and zk, at least right now, they are upgradable at the beginning, so we can always and there is a lot of opportunities and things that we have not even think about. The important is at the beginning is just the people to start using these rollups, the people understanding the advantages and see the different approaches that this new technology have, and the users will ask for these coordinations, transfers, and we will see. It's a lot of new things that we need to discover. I do not have a crystal ball, but yeah, I'm sure that's not. It's going to be a space. It's not going to be just one rollup, two rollups, or three rollups. It's going to be different rollups, and people. This technology will in some way be it will be accessible to many other projects, and I'm sure it's going to be a lot of very specific rollups that will appear in the space in the upcoming years.
Cool. I'm now going to ask Will's question, which is this is for zkVM, where is the state stored for EVM compatible zkVM? Does it all end up needing to go on L1, and who pays for the storage? I guess this is towards Alex, but maybe both of you?
Yeah, Alex.
Well, okay, so with for zkVM, you mean like storage slots of zkVM? So like
yeah, let me just find exactly where is the state stored?
the state is stored off-chain, just as for with any other zk rollup. So the validator store the state, and the users can follow the state if they want and also store it. And
Okay,
so
does it all end up needing to go on L1, and who pays for the storage? That's the second part of that.
So by saying that something goes on L1 in zk rollups, we mean that it's being broadcast through L1 and being distributed to the other validators and the users. Now, it's interesting. We're actually considering introducing state rent from the beginning in zkSync, because without state rent, the problem of endless state growth will continue, and we at least want to think through the interfaces and provide the developers with guidance on how to structure their contracts in such a way that the transition to state rent will be seamless for them, because we can do it from we start from scratch, and we don't have any legacy. But once you have state rent, it's actually the cost of the storage is very predictable, very low.
What is the word you're saying there? Is it state ran?
State rent. So
rent.
So yes, you pay for a certain period of storing your state, and not just for storing it forever when you make a transaction.
I have a lot of faith in Ethereum 2.0 for the data availability.
Pardon, I didn't hear the question. Can you repeat?
I think Jordy just said he has a lot of faith.
Yeah, I have a lot of faith in the Ethereum 2.0 for the data availability.
Well, Ethereum 2.0 will start with proof of stake, and it's going to be great if we will see proof of stake launching in anytime soon. And I think that sharding will follow with much longer delay than we will probably still have to wait for proof of stake even to arrive, but we will still have to wait much longer for sharding to arrive, and it's not yet 100% clear how sharding will work. So I wouldn't be that optimistic in this regard. I think we need to plan for let's hope for the best, but we need to plan for the worst, and be ready to work with a limited throughput for the next couple of years at least.
Yeah. Here, the thing in data availability, and it's something that's interesting, that's a little bit different about consensus, is that availability, you just need a single honest actor in the system. It's not like you need 2/3, you just need a single one. So this, I think it's a bit different. That's why, okay, I'm a little bit against this, sets, this
roll-up future?
These groups, the Validium kind, that's, for example, you have seven people that just storing. I'm a little against, but personally, I think that this can give you, so these intermediate solutions like Validium can give you enough air to wait for Ethereum 2.0 data availability if required. So that's.
Well, I'm not advocating for Validium. I don't like Validium. I think Validium is a threat because it will be centralized to a much higher degree.
Agree.
I'm advocating for zk Porter.
Yeah, but I agree. But I think that as a transitory solution, as a backup transitory solution until Ethereum 2.0 deploys data availability, it it can help in the development process, not in the decentralization, the development process of this space. But that's just, this is, we'll see. Maybe it's required, maybe not. We see how much data availability is required. There are different needs, but that's something that I would consider if there is a delay in the data availability in the Ethereum 2.0. But I really think that Ethereum 2.0 in less than a year we can have it. But I'm not a core dev, and I'm not an Ethereum core dev developer. But
I want to come in here because there's this question that actually I had listed something like it myself in the prep questions, which was, could one L1 rollup, for example, Ethereum, or I guess something built on Ethereum, come to consensus over state transitions on the rollup that requires state from another L1 rollup, example on Celo? I don't know exactly what that means, but I'm guessing it's could. I don't know if you can see it. It's actually just
I have a strong opinion on that. I would say that it's not possible, and this is exactly the same reason why it's not possible to have. So like I'm skeptical about lazy ledger. It would be great if John is still here to join us, because we have a space and talk about this. I'm really interested to hear what John will say. But the fundamental thing about layer ones is that they're forkable. It's like John was absolutely right. They are forkable, and because they are forkable, you can have two different chains with different rules where different people disagreed on what the canonical chain is. The majority went on one, and the minority went on the other one. Now, if you have a system that offers a bridge between, let's say, Ethereum and Bitcoin, how is this bridge supposed to work in case Bitcoin forks or Ethereum forks? Like you will have ambiguity built right into the system. You can do this. Like if you have a canonical state on one and the canonical state on the other one, like they are unforkable, and any spending on the one will be irreversible. Like if you have a message which is passed from one consensus to the other chain, you cannot really change anything after this message becomes finalized. And so with lazy ledger, you specifically have a problem that if the majority of, or like the minority of your users think that the data is unavailable, what are they gonna do? Like if you implemented it at the layer one level, they could just do a fork and say, okay, we don't trust this majority of the data storers. They don't do their job properly. They don't share data with us. We're just gonna go on a fork and continue there from the last known state. But how are you gonna do it at layer two? So like the only thing you can do at layer two is something like zk Porter, where you have to trust that you have an honest minority. But if you exceed that, they can always corrupt the data. There is nothing like. So I'm really curious what John had to say, but apparently he's not here anymore.
I don't think he's here. I mean, I think he might have it on, but I don't think he's actually hearing us, unfortunately. But I would say, in a lot of ways, I feel like we could continue this conversation forever. There's lots of questions still in the chat. But I would say this, I just sent an email out to everyone to head over to gather.town. I think now would probably be a great time. There's a lot of very specific questions based, like, specifically for you, Jordi, or specifically to you, Alex. So please head over there. Let's continue the conversation. And to everybody who came to this zk session, thank you so much for coming to map the L2 landscape. This is not everything. Obviously, there's lots of other L2s coming online who weren't here. So I think we'll have to continue that conversation in subsequent events as well. But thanks everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a great event.
Yeah, cool. All right, see you over at Gather then.